Wieliczka salt mine. Welcome to a journey through one of Poland's greatest treasures, the Wieliczka salt mine. Often described as a place of wonder, this mine is famous for its long history. Remarkable underground chapels, mysterious corridors, and salt-sculpted chambers. It has inspired visitors from around the world for centuries. Kings, emperors, explorers, and even famous artists. But it is not just for VIPs or historians. Today, the Wieliczka salt mine is open to everyone, attracting millions of people who want to experience its otherworldly atmosphere and learn about the source of white gold. Why is it called white gold? Before modern refrigeration and industrial chemicals, salt was once as precious as gold. It preserved food, maintained health, and acted as a cornerstone of civilization. A place that could produce huge amounts of high-quality salt was sure to become prosperous and influential. Wieliczka was exactly that kind of place. The mines there are some of the oldest in the world, with a history spanning over 700 years and counting. During all those centuries, the underground labyrinth continued to expand, and miners left behind an extraordinary cultural and historical legacy. In many travel lists and tour guides, you will see the Wieliczka salt mine appear as one of Poland's must-see attractions. It is also recognized by UNESCO, listed as a World Heritage Site. But a list is just a list, right? You might wonder, what exactly is so special about an old salt mine? You might think it's just tunnels in the earth with a bunch of salt walls. But the Wieliczka salt mine truly defies expectations. Visitors walk through a series of awe-inspiring rooms, sculptures, chapels, lakes, and even a fully functional underground church. There is beauty in every corner, and its story is filled with remarkable events that will spark your imagination. So if you want to travel back in time, discover unique geological formations, admire human craftsmanship, and even enjoy some health benefits from the salt-infused air, you have come to the right place. Let's begin this captivating journey into the depths of the Wieliczka salt mine, where the walls seem to whisper ancient tales of labor, dedication, faith, and artistic genius. The geological background of the salt deposit. Before diving into the mine's human history, let's talk about how this salt came to be. After all, we are dealing with rock salt, which is known scientifically as halite. Rock salt typically forms when large bodies of salt water, like seas or salt lakes, evaporate, leaving layers of salt behind. Over millions of years, these layers can become deeply buried under sediments, forming salt beds that might end up far below the surface. In the case of the Wieliczka salt mine, the salt layers are believed to date back to the Miocene era, which was roughly 5 to 23 million years ago. Back then, much of this part of Europe was under or near a shallow sea. As that sea changed, evaporated in places, or receded, different types of minerals, including salt, were left behind. Over geological time, these layers were folded and reshaped due to tectonic activity, giving rise to what we now call the Carpathian Four Deep. This shifting not only buried the salt, but also created various pockets and channels that would eventually form the complicated deposit we see in the Wieliczka region. To geologists, the Wieliczka salt deposit is a puzzle of different types of rock salt. Some layers are pure white crystals, others are streaked with clay or other minerals, which can give the salt a grayish or dirty appearance. If you walk through certain corridors, you might see walls with subtle color variations, white bands next to gray or even bluish tones. An intriguing part of the mine's geology is the presence of salt carpets or salt lumps known as salt mushrooms. These are shapes formed naturally when salt deposits were folded and molded by pressure underground. Additionally, there are brine springs, salty water, that can seep into the tunnels, creating the underground lakes. This is truly a hidden world that reminds us of the Earth's dynamic processes, far removed from our daily life on the surface. Discovery and early use of Wieliczka salt. Human fascination with salt stretches back thousands of years. Long before anyone burrowed tunnels hundreds of meters below the surface, people found salt in simpler ways, like evaporating brine from natural springs. In the region of Wieliczka, such salt-rich springs were known in prehistoric times, Early settlers would gather salt from the surface or through shallow wells. Over time, as the demand for salt grew, people dug deeper. That is how they discovered the vast underground salt deposits that would lead to formal mining. There is a charming legend about Wieliczka's discovery, the story of Princess Kinga. According to the tale, Princess Kinga, later known as Saint Kinga, a Hungarian princess, was set to marry a Polish prince. Her father, wanting to give her a valuable dowry to bring to Poland, offered her gold. But Kinga refused, asking instead for salt, knowing how important salt was to her new kingdom. She traveled to a salt mine in Hungary, dropped her engagement ring into a shaft, and when she arrived in Poland, a miracle happened. Workers dug into the ground and discovered a chunk of salt containing her ring. From that point on, Poland had its own precious salt resource at Wieliczka. While this story is legendary rather than purely historical, it reveals how special salt was at that time and ties into the deep cultural significance of the mine. Regardless of how it was first discovered, by the 13th century, locals recognized they had a large source of salt underground. As technology advanced, more consistent mining methods replaced the simple gathering of surface salt. Soon, Wieliczka became a key part of the Polish economy, helping fund the kingdom through the profits from salt extraction. Even at these earliest stages, mining was a perilous undertaking. Wooden supports, basic tools, and candlelight in narrow tunnels below ground were not easy conditions to work in. But salt was so vital that the operation continued to expand, laying the foundation for centuries of prosperity. The value of salt in human history. To understand why Wieliczka's salt mine became such a powerhouse in medieval times and beyond, it helps to grasp the immense value of salt throughout human history. Food preservation. Before modern refrigeration, salt was one of the best ways to preserve meat, fish, and other perishable foods. It prevented the growth of bacteria and allowed people to store food for winter or for long journeys. Flavor enhancement. Salt has always been a flavor booster. Even a small amount can transform the taste of food. People in the Middle Ages loved salted meats, fish, and pickled vegetables. Health benefits. Humans need a certain amount of salt to stay healthy. In times when diets could be poor, having an accessible salt source helped maintain proper bodily functions. Trade and wealth. Because salt was so precious, it became a form of currency in some areas. Salary, the word we still use for wages, comes from the Latin salarium, which has roots in sal, meaning salt. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, controlling salt production was extremely lucrative for governments and wealthy merchants. Strategic importance. Towns with abundant salt resources were often wealthy and could attract markets, trade routes, and political power. Salt taxes were major sources of revenue for states. France's gabelle, salt tax, famously contributed to social unrest that helped spark the French Revolution. Poland, though different in culture and politics, also benefited from salt taxes and revenues. Because of these factors, the Wieliczka salt mine was not just a hole in the ground, it was a strategic asset for the Polish kingdom. Kings guarded it carefully, used its profits to strengthen their rule, and over time built a robust administrative system around it. As we move forward in this story, you will see how that system helped shape the mine and preserved it for future generations to discover and enjoy. Early mining techniques. When you step into the Wieliczka salt mine, or imagine yourself there, it might be easy to overlook the intense work that went into carving out each chamber. In the early days, mining was done mostly with manual labor, using pickaxes, hammers, chisels, and rudimentary explosives, though large-scale explosives came much later. Miners had to be skilled and brave, working in dimly lit areas with open flames. They faced constant dangers from collapsing tunnels, toxic gases, and flooding. Additionally, salt dust can irritate eyes and lungs, so breathing was not always easy. Wooden beams and planks served as the primary support for tunnels and chambers, trying to prevent cave-ins. Given the damp conditions from brine seepage, these wooden structures had to be replaced or bolstered regularly. Transporting the salt was another challenge. In the earlier stages, workers carried salt out in sacks or used simple pulleys. Later on, as mining technology progressed, horse-driven treadmills were introduced to help hoist salt to the surface. It's fascinating to imagine large, muscular horses walking in circles underground, never seeing daylight, just to move the precious salt from lower to higher levels. Throughout the centuries, mine engineers introduced new ideas to make extractions safer and more efficient. They built shafts and galleries at different depths, installed water drainage systems, and used specialized machines. One reason the Wieliczka salt mine is so captivating is that many of these old devices, corridors, and machines still exist underground, giving it the atmosphere of a living museum. Early cultural and religious elements. The Wieliczka salt mine is not just about raw materials and mining technology. From the earliest times, miners expressed their faith, hopes, and gratitude by carving chapels, altars, and crosses in the rock salt. Mining was dangerous, and many men prayed for protection or gave thanks for surviving another day underground. The presence of these religious carvings is a testament to how important faith was to the workers' daily lives. As you venture through the mine, you will see multiple small chapels, each with its own unique character. Over time, they grew in size and artistic complexity, culminating in what is now considered a crown jewel of Wieliczka. Life of the miners. Miners often started their days before dawn, descending into the dark, cold tunnels. They used oil lamps or torches to light their way, carefully avoiding open flames near any pockets of flammable gases. The physical labor of cutting and hauling salt required significant strength and stamina. Despite the risks, mining communities formed a close bond. In many cases, entire families dedicated themselves to salt mining. Fathers passed down their skills to their sons, and sometimes wives or daughters worked at the surface to process the extracted salt or handle administrative tasks. Strong religious faith also played a role in miners' lives, as they prayed for protection before entering the depths. Artistic expressions underground. One of the most remarkable features of the Wieliczka salt mine is the presence of art deep within its corridors. Over generations, miners developed a tradition of carving statues and decorative elements out of salt. Some of these carvings were simple altars or small figures, while others were elaborate scenes depicting biblical stories or Polish historical events. The unique texture and translucence of salt allowed for stunning effects when candlelight or electric lamps illuminated these sculptures. This artistic tradition culminated in the creation of several large underground chapels, the most famous of which is the Chapel of St. Kinga. The chapel features an impressive altar, salt crystal chandeliers, and detailed wall reliefs that portray scenes from the life of Jesus, among other religious subjects. All of these elements are made almost entirely of salt, showcasing the ingenuity and skill of the miners who created them. Aside from religious art, there are chambers within the mine that display historical events or pay homage to famous Polish figures, such as the astronomer Nicholas Copernicus. These artworks serve not only as decoration, but also as a way to preserve and celebrate Polish identity and pride, especially during periods when the nation faced foreign rule or partition. From industrial hub to tourist attraction. By the 19th century, salt extraction in Wieliczka was still significant, but the mine was gradually becoming a tourist curiosity as well. Educated elites from across Europe, including scientists, nobles, and members of royal families, visited Wieliczka to see its famous underground wonders. Travelogues from the time describe guided tours that highlighted the most spectacular chambers and sculptures. These early tourists often expressed amazement at the sheer scale of the mine and the artistry carved into its salt walls. The Austrian rule over the region, from the late 18th century until World War I, also brought changes to the mine's administration. While the Habsburg authorities taxed the production of salt, they recognized the mine's potential for attracting wealthy travelers. This period saw an expansion of visitor amenities, such as better lit chambers, safer pathways, and the inclusion of guided tours for those willing to pay a fee. Tourist visits, though still limited compared to modern numbers, became an important secondary source of revenue. Visiting the Wieliczka salt mine is often described as a journey to a different world. Each section has its own unique atmosphere, decorations, and stories.